Hi! Welcome to Let's Go Kickass today. I'm your host, Vicky Carter. This is a monthly podcast where I chat to inspirational people from the fields of music, adventure and culture. People who basically are really kicking ass and making their own rules in life. So if you want to feel empowered and inspired, you've come to the right place. Welcome to my 10th episode of Let's Go Kickass today. That's exciting. I've reached double figures. And I really enjoy interviewing incredibly inspirational people every single month. And hopefully you feel empowered and inspired too. And this month is no exception. First up, I speak to singer, songwriter and musician Rozalla about her experiences of the music industry and her new single, Leave the Light On.
Honestly, speaking from my experience, at the age of 55, all I can say is never give up.
I then speak to actress Clementina Allende Iriarte about how she found she had hearing difficulties at drama school and how that's led her to play for the Westcliff rugby team, as well as the England women's deaf team too.
I think if you're in a comfortable place and you're striving to do something and you're scared to do it, you have to think about, will you be any worse off if it doesn't pay off, or will you just be where you are now?
Finally, I speak to Managing Director of Click2 Media, Chris Haycock, about his experiences of homelessness, how he overcame this, and how he became CEO.
And I think it's just persistence, because sometimes you can get knocked down so many times, time and time and time again. But it only takes that one time for one door to open.
My first guest for my 10th episode of Let's Go Kickass today is musician, singer-songwriter Rozalla. I speak to her about how her career has developed, how she ended up touring with Michael Jackson and the challenges of the music industry today. I ask, how do you feel that your music is still being played in pubs, clubs and raves?
Honestly, Vicky, if you told me, I counted Everybody's Free is now 28 years old this year. And had anyone told me that 28 years later you'd be going out and, performing at I Love the 90s festivals or I Love the 90s this or that, because there seems to be a rage about that all going on right now, I wouldn't have believed you, and Kylie Minogue doing a cover of it for her album, I think about 2 years ago. You get so many of these contestants who are singing it on these talent shows as well. And in fact, there was a young lady in Australia, I think it was The Voice, and somebody said, oh, she's singing Everybody's Free. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. So I checked her out on Facebook or YouTube. We got to be friends on Instagram, and I wished her well. And she's recovering from cancer and stuff like that. She's only young, can't be more than 30. And she did Everybody's Free, and that did so well for her. And I think to myself, things like that has helped keep the profile of the song raised. Boots using it for the advert, which is Boots, I love Boots.
Oh my gosh, that's great, yeah.
And all these young producers who are doing mixes in their back room now and are, releasing it on YouTube. And I think, all that has really helped keep the song's profile raised.
Yeah, and keep it alive. That's
Absolutely.
The thing. It's timeless.
Yeah.
And it's still used, and it can be transcendent across a load of genres and platforms.
It's been incredible. For instance, somebody said to me, oh, how do you feel about Kylie having covered it? I'm like, look, what happened was, one of the funny things was they played Kylie's version on the radio. I just happened to hear the one time. And they're like, now let's play the real version by Rozalla. So I still get a mention.
Yes, that's
My
me.
name,
Hello.
That's
yes,
me.
thank
Hello.
you.
Hello. And it's just wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Let's go back to when originally, your music career developed. You grew up in Zambia, then you moved to Zimbabwe, and you started fronting R&B bands. What was it like there?
Well, as you say, I grew up in Zambia, and I started doing children's television programs. And then we moved to Zimbabwe. I was a little older. Then, I started thinking, I want a musical career. I want to record songs of my own. And then I got into be a front singer for this R&B band, as you say, and we were doing covers of other people's songs. Most of them were R&B or dance tracks that were a little up-tempo. And so there was nothing original there, but that helped give me a platform. And during that time, there was a talent contest going in Zimbabwe, which was like the X Factor, if you want to.
Oh,
you know, it was
that's
incredible,
exciting, yeah.
and I won all the 3 hits of that, and
Congratulations.
which was incredible, and that got me a recording deal with a local record company in Zimbabwe, and I went on to recording my own original material, and I became this starlet in Zimbabwe. You know, and it was amazing. And my records were going to #1. And they had this program every Saturday called the Hit Pick. And so they had people calling in, voting for songs, and my songs always got voted. So I kept on staying at #1 all the time. But then it came to a point whereby I thought, I've reached the highest level I could in Zimbabwe. I need to break out and become international.
That's the power.
That's
yes.
the power, you know, and it just so happened. You know, Vicky, I think when I look back now, you know, I'm 55, and when you put thoughts out there and you look back, things have a way of conspiring to help you get there, you know. So I'm not saying everything I think has worked out, but I thought I want to go to England or America and become an international singer, because I'd done it in Zimbabwe now. I'd gotten as far as I could. And then the next thing, I get spotted by someone who owned a recording studio in the UK. Thinking, oh, wow, okay.
That's lucky, crikey.
Honestly. And then the next thing I know, I'm traveling to the UK, late 1988. And I started recording material. And at the time, it was cassettes. So we were sending around cassettes to try and get myself a record deal.
Wow. What was the music scene like in Zimbabwe at the time? And were you always dreaming of a music career? And were your parents that supportive of it?
All my life, from the time I can remember, I've always wanted to be a singer. All my life, my parents were very supportive.
Oh, wonderful.
My mum wasn't so 100% because she was worried about, you know, the sex, drugs and rock and roll. That's all she was concerned about, and her daughter traveling abroad. And she's not there to look after me and watch me, and, you know, because she had an eagle eye on me all the time. But,
very mother-like.
Exactly. And, you know, I got all my relatives telling her, look, she's okay, Rozalla's a good girl. Yeah, but you don't know the influences and blah, blah, blah. So, but she was a great support and still is, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
And then what was it like that pivotal moment, just coming to London for the first time? What were the thoughts going through your head when you arrived?
Oh, gosh, I think the first thing that happened, I think it was Heathrow that I arrived at. I just remember thinking, it's so cold.
Yeah, not much has changed.
No, not much has changed. No.
Yeah.
And this friend of mine, I had a jacket, but he brought a heavier jacket for me. He's like, you're going to need this. But I was so excited, you know, a different country, a different culture. But, you know, the one thing that it had in common with Zimbabwe was, thank goodness, it was an English-speaking country. So I felt good.
Felt at ease and
I
and
felt at ease.
comfortable.
I could get on with everyone. I could speak. I could understand what anyone else was talking about. And because, you know, I spoke English. Yeah.
And you started creating your own music in Zimbabwe, but then also in London as well. How did it feel to finally have your own creative stamp on it?
Incredible. I mean, which is what I was dreaming of when I started, you know, fronting this R&B band, and we're doing other people's songs. And I thought, I need to have my own material out there. I need to have Rozalla songs. And then going back to when I was sending around cassettes in the late 1988, 89, it fell into the laps of Tim and Nigel, who were known as the Band of Gypsies at the time. And because I got a lot of rejection letters from record labels saying, you're good, but sorry, we can't. You know, it was one of those. And I'm thinking, okay, just keep you know, posting those cassettes, and you never know. And then it fell on the laps of the Band of Gypsies. And they loved my voice, and I met with them, and they're like, look, what do you want to do? And I thought, this is my chance, you know, to put my stamp on my mark on it, and their stamp and their mark on it as well. And I said, I want to do tracks that are uplifting, that, you know, when anyone's sitting down, even if they don't want to get up and dance, they want to put their hands up in the air and go, yeah, you know, we love this. And I want lyrics that were positive and uplifting. And so if you listen to the Everybody's Free album, the majority of the lyrics on that album are positive.
Yeah. And that's the exact effect, the immediate effect from listening to your music. I mean, it still continues on.
Yeah.
And what was the journey like working with Band of Gypsies and then going and touring with the king of pop, Michael Jackson?
Incredible. I mean, honestly, that, you know, it's like going back and thinking these thoughts, you know, right now I'm thinking of winning the Euro Lotto, so let's see where that goes. You know, thinking thoughts. But, you know, seriously, growing up, I loved the Jacksons. I loved Michael Jackson. I was in awe of these people. I mean, who wasn't? The Jackson 5. And years later, to support the king of pop, Michael Jackson. Honestly, Vicky, that will forever remain the highlight of my career. One of the highlights of my career, shall I say.
That's incredible. Yeah. And you went to play at Wembley as well with him.
Yeah, we did Wembley. We did, I think I did about 42 or 43 stadiums across Europe. We did about, we were on tour for about 3 months or 3.5 months across Europe. And it was just the most exciting, wonderful journey, but also so tiring.
I can imagine that is exhausting.
Oh my God, I don't know how he did it. And, for most artists who go on tour, it's hard work because, you're traveling from one place to the next nearly every day or nearly every second day. And I thought, how is Michael Jackson doing this? And how is it on his voice, on your vocal cords, And a couple of times at the 11th hour, he cancelled his tour.
Really?
He cancelled the show.
Yeah.
And I remember it was at Wembley actually. We did 2 or 3 dates at Wembley. And I did my set, which was about 45 minutes. And he'd normally come on 30 minutes after me. And I remember his security guard standing on the side, sort of calling me when I was finishing my last song. And I finished my last song, and I said, MJ will be on next, if only just to hear the screams, because I love the people screaming when I call out his name.
That's incredible. Sorry, I can't even imagine what it's like to stand there with all those people. Wow.
And I'd say Michael Jackson will be on it, and just to hear their screams, I think I was saying that more for that, and it was incredible. And as soon as I said that, I looked on the side, and the security guards were calling me, beckoning me over, and I said bye to them, and they literally pulled me off that stage, took me straight to the tour bus. I thought, what is going on here? And got into the tour bus, and we left the stadium as soon as possible. They were worried that a riot was going to happen because Michael had cancelled at the last minute. And I believe now it was all down to him having lost his voice.
Wow, that's terrifying. That a riot could. But there's so many people as well who, you're paying those tickets.
Absolutely. But fortunately, that didn't turn out. A few, Coca-Cola cans were thrown on the stage.
Crikey.
But it didn't blow out into anything of the sort, which, it was they were all very well behaved.
Yeah. And you've also worked with Frankie Knuckles, and you've toured with Billy Ocean. I mean, these are incredible legends you've worked with.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Frankie, may his soul rest in peace. I worked with him. He did a track called Baby, which I did when I was signed to Sony. And I remember recording that with him when I went to New York. He was such a wonderful soul, and he would come in with his roast chicken and his roast collard greens, he called them, and his mashed potatoes, and he'd feed me. And I thought, it's so nice going to the studio with this guy because he's feeding me all this wonderful food. But he was so talented and such a lovely human being. And Billy Ocean, again, just a wonderful human being and so talented. I got to do that gig. I did about 53 dates with him across 2008, 2009. And that came about because I recorded an album. I call it a easy listening jazz soul type album, because I thought my voice can lend to ballads, to jazz, instead of dance music, which is what I'm known for, which honestly I don't mind. And so I got to do this album, which is my dream album. And Billy's like, why don't you come and, tour with me and do the album? Yeah, that's how that came about. So I had, a 3-piece band. I had Simon on piano, Alexis on bass, and John Jackson on drums, and myself singing. And we were doing these concert venues where you had anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 people. So it was so different from me doing my club dates where it's so loud. And if my voice is tired, I've got somewhere to hide. But I had nowhere to hide. So if I lost my voice, it was just with my 3-piece band and this beautifully acoustic room. Or, most of the rooms are really well held for vocals, and your audience. And I had nowhere to hide behind. So I thought, oh, gosh, please. So Billy was really good. He also taught me how to warm up as well. And I became friends with all the guys on Billy's tour as well. And I found also when I was on tour with the Michael Jackson crew as well as Billy, because you're traveling, you all become like a family that are on the lookout for one another. You're all nervous before you go on stage, so you're all giving each other a high five and going, it's okay, this is all right. This is how we earn our living, and let's go and entertain. Let's do what we know and do our best. And it's always wonderful. It was wonderful, good memories.
And it really brings people together with a state of nerves and that sense of euphoria afterwards when you've achieved something that you might have been slightly nervous before, and you're living together, you're playing together, you're rehearsing together and performing. It's constantly, and that's what brings you closer.
Absolutely.
And you were saying before how you felt, well, even like your voice was slightly naked because you didn't have that dance music you were battling. But that's how incredibly talented you are, is that you can transcend and blend to any genre of music. What kind of genre of music would you say has been your favourite to perform to?
Oh, gosh, I don't have a favourite because it depends what
mood you're in,
what mood I'm in or what shows I'm invited to perform at, in the last few months, I've been invited to do a lot of these massive I Love the 90s festivals. And I've been doing anywhere between 2 to 3 to 5 songs or 30-minute sets. And usually the sound quality is so fantastic. So it's just myself and maybe dancers on the stage. And I've got my band members coming out of the USB stick that's been stuck into the machine or something. And then now and again, I do, smaller venues where I got a 3-piece band. So it's always exciting. It's always different, and I don't think I ever get bored. No, it's always exciting.
How would you say the music industry has developed from when you were in Zimbabwe to also when you were performing with Michael Jackson, and now when people are putting in their USB sticks?
It's the music industry has changed. Obviously it's changed, and in some ways I think for the up-and-coming artist, it's been good for them in the sense that they can record their own material without the need to go and get a record deal, which I understand that at the end of the day, everybody wants to get a record deal, to get heard, to have someone pay for their stuff, to get them out there. But in this day and age with YouTube, with the internet, you can put your stuff out there alone. And then I think most record companies prefer that because that's how they find in the artists that have made names for themselves already, and then they get them and then take it from there. So it's changed, but I still find it a tough industry. That's one thing that hasn't changed.
Yeah, I kind of see it as a tiger, really, a metaphor of an animal. Like it can chew you and spit you out. Absolutely.
And that's why, Vicky, when I think everybody's free, although I had 3 big hits in the 90s, Are You Ready to Fly, Faith in the Power of Love, and of course Everybody's Free. Everybody's Free is my golden ticket. That has continued to sustain me, as well as the other 2 songs. And then of course I've had, other songs in between there. I did I Love Music for Carlito's Way. I got to meet Al Pacino and I danced with him. Work with Jelly Bean Benitez, who did I Love Music, Frankie Knuckles, and it's all been just a very interesting ride.
What advice would you give to someone who is hoping to create music and also to fight that battle with the music industry?
Honestly, speaking from my experience, at the age of 55, all I can say is never give up. There's been moments in my career where I've had tiny moments of, when I've thought, what am I doing? Maybe it's time for me to, call this a day. And then I keep getting these, show offers. Right now I'm working on finishing my album through Energize Records, and I've currently got the new single off it called Turn on the Light. And all these things keep happening. So my mind says, no, you still, keep driving that car.
Yeah, hell yeah, you've still got it.
Still got it. And I love what I do. I absolutely still feel very passionate about what I do. And my agent said to me, oh, you still feel very passionate about what you do. So as long as that flame is still burning inside me, I will just keep on the straight and narrow and just keep doing what I do.
Yeah, you've still got that passion, you've still got that energy, you've still got that drive and that talent as well.
Thank you.
No worries. So focusing on that song, Turn on the Light, your new one. Yeah, I mean, it's your amazing vocals, and I hear this like fresh energy as well. I mean, how do you feel about that track?
Turn on the Light? Well, that came about with, I co-wrote that with Jason Prince and Nick Crittenden. And I feel so excited because I was part of the co-write, and in fact, it was my husband who said, why don't you write a song that's sort of semi-biographical? So when you listen to the lyrics of Turn on the Light, I'm talking about some of the tough times, But when I go out there and I turn on the light, everyone puts their hands in the air and they all sing in. There's a bit in Turn on the Light where Jason is actually singing "Everybody's Free."
No.
Yeah. So we've got all this going on there, and through the ups, through the downs, the audience have kept me going, because even if I'm feeling down before I go on stage, when I'm out there, you just hear "wow" and their hands up in the air. I mean, how can you not get excited or feel something from that's positive? And the show must go on. They still want me. They're still asking for me. So that's how Turn on the Light came on.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's funny because you've said that, and so when I've listened to it a couple of times, I didn't notice that, but now I'll look for it.
Now
in
she's
the song,
going to listen
and
to
I'll
it
go,
carefully.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So many
exactly.
layers to music.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said, so you're working on your album. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, I think we've got, I was speaking to Gary the other day, and we've got another 3 or 4 more tracks left to put down on the album. We have 2 or 3 tracks that are possible follow-up singles that are waiting to be released after Turn on the Light. So we're still choosing which ones. But I'm happy that's where we are. So things are still going. And the initial plan is to release another single after Turn on the Light, and possibly another, and then drop the album sometime in 2020.
That's exciting.
Yeah, really excited.
What's the process like? I mean, do you find the inspiration and you create the songs back to back, or will you step away, create a song, and then come back to it and create a new one? How does it work?
With this album that I'm working on, when I spoke to Gary said, and I was, we had a meeting, and Gary and I were in agreement that we didn't want to record an album that was all hands up in the air. We wanted an album that had dimensions to it of ballads, mid-tempo, hands up in the air, and some covers. So we've got some covers in there that were probably recorded in the 60s or the 70s that nobody would know, or if they did, they'd go, I think I might recognize that track, So we're really excited. And then, of course, some of them are co-writes, like Turn on the Light I co-wrote that one. That's a complete original.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and you are a real inspiration to the music industry.
Thank you, Vicky. I really appreciate that. And when you say things like that, or when I hear people saying things like that, I get so shocked. It shocks me. Honestly, it shocks me, because I think, I'm just doing what I've set out to do. I love what I do. I love performing. And then when you say things like, I'm an inspiration, or I've been going for however long I have been in this music industry, it's just, I think, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah,
because I don't look at it that way. I just think, I'm just doing my thing. I'm just
thing,
singing. I'm just enjoying it. I'm recording material. And like I say, for the most part, I love what I do, and I'm not giving up. But there's been moments when I wanted to, but then I have people like Gary or my fans, and then people like you who you've given me that injection, like, yeah, I'm going to keep going.
Well, there we have it. The secrets of success from Rozalla. Never give up. And if it sets your soul on fire, then you should be doing it. And look out for her new album too in the new year. Next up is actress Clementina Allende Iriarte. She tells me about her passion behind her acting, the challenges of being deaf in both the arts and sports world, and how she came to play rugby for not only Westcliff, but the Women's England's deaf team too. You first started out acting. Tell me about your passion for acting. When did you realise, this is something that I really want to do?
Oh, no one ever asked me this question. So my family's very artistic. They've always been very artistic, but they're all like painters and stuff. And I was never good at that. So I just sort of faffed about really with like dance and drama and stuff at school. And I think when I was 11, I was in Oliver Twist with my best friend. He was Oliver and I was Dodger. And I think it was just like, this is so much fun. Should we just carry on doing this? So then we just started going to like drama groups, and it just sort of built from there. And obviously you get that generic thing of being like, it's my way of expressing myself. But honestly, I find that I really connect with like using my body and my brain in my work. So like acting obviously encompasses both. So I don't know really, yeah. And then I started to find like topics that I was passionate about that you can channel into acting.
And how was it actually studying there? Because drama school is tough. There's a lot of people who don't make it into drama school, don't sustain their time there.
Yes, it is tough. It's really tough. So I was very lucky that I got in my first year of auditioning. But I actually deferred my place for a year because I wasn't very well. So I came back later. And It is tough. I mean, it's incredibly intense. So we were doing 5 days a week, from about 8:30 in the morning until 6:10 in the evening. And then when we were having shows as well, we would do extra rehearsals in the evening, like 5-6 days a week. So they were really long days. And obviously you're with the same group of people every day doing really intense things. Like some of the exercises in our first year, they were completely intended to just break you down as a person so that you can then build yourself back up, like as an actor, as a performer, as an artist. You go through this whole like training together, the same group of people, and honestly, like the love that you feel for everyone in your class is just like nothing else. But there's also a lot of hatred as well. It's like with sibling rivalries, like you just get sick of the same people. But it was honestly, like, this sounds so cliche, but it was a life-changing experience, and I am so grateful to have been there when I was there at that point in my life, and to have learnt everything that I learnt and be on this sort of up-and-coming course that no one really knows about. And yeah, it was amazing.
But it is incredible that you say that. It is like a family. I mean, I did a national youth theatre course when I was 17, and that was 2 weeks, and we felt like a family.
So,
I know. And so you guys, obviously, it's a whole year, or how many years was it?
3 years.
3 years, exactly. And how has your own cultural identity, do you think, changed, if it has at all, or developed your perspective of the arts, and especially the arts in the UK as well?
So this is really interesting, actually, because when I started on the course, I said to the head of the course, Ramiro, that I wanted to work in South American political theatre in London. And that was just like something that I'd plucked from the air. I was like, that's, you know, politics, Argentina, culture, whatever, I can do that. And I think it's taken me 3.5 years to get to now to actually realise what that means and what I want to do. So the show I'm working on at the moment is called White Latina, which is about growing up dual nationality and not fitting any kind of cultural stereotype. And I say the struggle, but it's actually very funny. You know, it's talking about just being such a misfit in life. We've been to a few like Latin creative scratch nights and seen like Latin American theatre in London and stuff like that. And it's really made me realise that there's still a lot of bitterness around how Latin American people are treated in Europe. And they're kind of seen as the underdogs, like the maids, the gardeners, those like stereotypes. And there's so much hostility in that area that no one's using theatre as a means to bring the culture in like an enlightening way to London. They're just kind of bitter, and that's what I want to change. In the same way that you've got the Lion King in the West End, and it's a very generic storyline, kind of, obviously they're lions, but it's a generic storyline, but they've got the African drums, the dancing, the costume. You can do that with Latin America as well, and it's such a rich culture. So basically, to summarise, I want to use my heritage and the profiling that I've got to bring that culture to like Western theatre, because I think it's something that hasn't been explored yet.
That's fantastic. That's so exciting as well for your project and your future projects. And so you have hearing problems as well. How has that impacted you, not only being an actor, but also the challenges in doing so? Yeah,
so there's quite funny actually. The first 2 years at drama school, I couldn't sing. I still can't sing. That hasn't changed. But my music teacher used to tell me that I sounded like a man because I was so bad at pitching things that I would just, I mean, I talk quite low anyway, but I would just kind of be like, when I was trying to sing. And it was like a running joke in the class. Like everyone was like, why do you sound like a man all the time? Anyway, it turns out that I couldn't hear properly, but I only discovered my hearing loss while I was at drama school. Wow. Because the singing thing was the first problem, but also in a studio space, it's quite echoey sometimes. You've got people all around you moving and shouting, whatever. And I just was dizzy all the time. I was like, why is everyone talking? Can't figure it out. So I got my ears tested and got hearing aids, all the rest of it, while I was at drama school. And I started to be able to pitch things, and I could actually sing by the time I got to third year. Not very well, but better than I was before. I do still find it hard in rehearsals, in theatre spaces, like when the acoustics are bad or it's echoey, stuff like that. I do struggle. But obviously hearing aids have massively changed my life as well. But honestly, that was something that brought me really close to the people on my course. Actually, they were so supportive when I found out that I was losing my hearing. I remember I stood up on a chair in front of the whole, like, all 45 of them, and I was like crying a little bit, like, guys, I'm losing my hearing, I'm really sorry, I don't know what to do. And everyone was just hugging me, and they were like, oh, like, we're here for you, whatever you need for us to do that will make it easier, we'll do it. And so supportive. It was amazing.
And do you think the arts is accessible enough?
Oh, that's really interesting. I don't really know, to be honest. I think the arts is difficult because people who are artistic aren't necessarily all the same. Like, in the sporting world, everyone in the sporting world is sporty. Like, you get injuries from sports, but you're generally all fit, sporty and healthy. But in the artistic world, you have people of all different levels of fitness, some with chronic illnesses, some without, some with children, some without. And I think the arts finds a way of being accessible to everyone in a different way. So it's really difficult to say, like, oh, there are equal opportunities for deaf people in the arts as there are for everybody else, because it's just different. I know that I can't go into an audition and just hear music and be able to sing in tune with it. I know that I can't do that. But that's something for me to figure out, in the same way that someone else might not be a very physical performer because they have a bad back. They just wouldn't put themselves up for physical roles. So I just don't put myself in that situation where I know I will struggle necessarily. So I think it's the arts working to help people, but people helping themselves as well in the arts, maybe.
You know what works for you and what doesn't, and you use your assets to benefit you.
Exactly.
So speaking about the sporting world, when did you find out that you were talented at rugby as well?
I still don't think I'm talented at rugby. People keep saying this to me. I'm just shy away from it every time. In my second year at university, I was really struggling with being around the same people all day, every day, in the same room. I couldn't deal with it anymore. And it manifested in a really unhealthy way. I got very angry, like, all the time. I just saw red all the time. And I think it was actually a bit of, like, social anxiety. And I was having problems with my boyfriend at the time. And it was just a really, really, like, dark place. Anyway, it actually was my ex-boyfriend who suggested that I just throw a ball around, get out, get some fresh air, have a bit of a run around with him and his friends, chuck a ball and sort of see how it goes. So I did, like, reluctantly. I went down, got muddy, put some boots on, whatever. And turns out that Southend Rugby Club actually were starting a ladies team. So I was like, oh, okay, like, once a week training, get out of the house, get a bit of fresh air, be nice. So I went down and, I don't know, so that was December. And in February, we played, like, a development game against Bishop Stortford. And their coach came up to me and was like, oh, you're fearless, like, do you want to play for us, as a joke? And I was like, fearless? That's hilarious. Why do you think I'm fearless? He was like, like, you're going for the tackles, you're sprinting up to it, you're doing this really well, you're doing that really well, and you're a development team, it looks like you've played before. And it kind of, like, stuck in my head that I was like, this is really interesting that this guy who doesn't know me thinks that I know how to play rugby, because at the time I had no idea what I was doing. And I was playing scrum half at this point, which just isn't my position at all. So I was really, like, flabbergasted. Anyway, I just kind of kept it up as an anger management thing, really, like, just to release my energy and hit a few tackle pads and get the anger out. And then I don't really know. People started saying that I was good, and it kind of went from there. Me, little old me. And then my coach at this, I think it was an Essex event actually. He met one of the secretaries of the England Deaf team and told them about me, because when I started playing rugby was when I first found out that my hearing was going, so they've kind of gone side by side the whole time. So anyway, he talked to the secretary of the EDRU, mentioned about me, and he was like, oh, come along, like, come to the Sevens tournament in Ilkley and blah, blah, blah. And it just sort of happened by itself. I didn't actually do anything, it just took me away with the journey.
And has it been difficult, playing rugby with your hearing problems?
Yeah, I find it really difficult.
Much more than the arts world.
I feel like there's a specific support network in the rugby world for me, which is the EDRU. So it's much less daunting than the arts world. But yes, I do find it... I find it more challenging to keep at the same level as everybody else in rugby. As our team has got better and we progressed into NC2, we started doing fancier things in our gameplay, our structures, our lineouts, whatever, like in the movements that we were doing. They started to get more complex. And as we've progressed, like, with our training, felt myself sort of lagging behind. I can't hear what's being explained. I'm not always on top of it in the same way as everyone else. And thank God I'm on the wing so that I can just watch what's going on and then sort of go with it at the end. But yeah, I have found it really hard. But to be fair, my team have been really accommodating, especially since I started playing with England as well. And now we've figured out, like, hand movements and I make sure we've got like books now where we write down all the moves and we share it in like group chats and stuff. So it's getting better, but yeah, there definitely was a moment probably last season where I was like, oh, I can't hear anyone and I don't know what's going on.
But it's wonderful they're making the adjustments
Yeah.
now and making it easier for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it must be so amazing to score tries and be a part of a team, and especially the England team as well. I mean,
Yeah.
how is that experience?
It's huge. Oh, so I played the Sevens tournament with them in the summer. We've only done training since then. And honestly, it's amazing though, like going to the training sessions, and they've been so welcoming. I couldn't believe it. I was like, when I first arrived, I was thinking, God, they're like an elite group, you know, England deaf, this is huge. And I got there and they were like, yeah, you're right, this is dopey and this is blah, blah, blah. And we're just having a can of whatever cider and yeah, join it. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, great. So they've been so welcoming and so keen to explain stuff to me. There's a lot of politics behind deaf sport and deaf like organisations that I just had no idea about, and they've really taken the time to explain it to me, and there's no shame in being new with the England Deaf Rugby at all. Like, they're happy to welcome anyone of any ability and grow as a team, which is that community feel that we're trying to spread across, and the message we're trying to send of like inclusivity for deaf people in sport and stuff. So it's amazing. Yeah.
No, it's wonderful to be part of a team like that.
Yeah.
And finally, in advice, what would you give to someone who's thinking about doing something but they're terrified because something might be holding them back, whether that's like the anxiety or physically or...
I think if you're in a comfortable place and you're striving to do something and you're scared to do it, you have to think about, will you be any worse off if it doesn't pay off, or will you just be where you are now? Because as long as your situation isn't getting any worse than it currently is, there's no reason not to strive for it. Because at the best, it goes well. You know, you play for England, or you get the acting job that you want, or, you know, whatever it might be, you get the reporting job, you get the podcast, like whatever. If it pays off, then good. If it doesn't, you're exactly as safe and as comfortable as you are now.
What incredible inspirational and motivational words from Clementina there about pushing your boundaries. Finally, I speak to my last guest, Managing Director of Click2 Media, Chris Haycock. He shares the harsh realities of being homeless, how difficult it is to come out of that situation and building up his career. I actually interviewed him at this incredibly extravagant and beautiful hotel in St. Catherine's Dock in London, and it just highlights what he was sharing with me in the content of his story and how his whole world has developed and changed to where he is now.
Back in 1992, I was still in the Navy, and I came from school into the Navy because it was the accepted thing for me to do because my family were also in the Navy. And I left the Navy completely unprepared for life outside somewhere that really looks after you, make sure that you're clean and fed, and you know you get looked after in the forces. So once I left the Navy, obviously because I was so unprepared for it, I ended up doing a multitude of silly little crazy jobs for a year or so, until I found myself homeless. And at first I began sofa surfing at friends' house, until eventually they just had enough, because I wasn't able to pay any bills or anything or contribute anything towards them. So after that it was a case of going into backpackers hostels, where back then it was cost about £6 or £7 a night or so I could just about afford to do that. But obviously once my money ran out, what then? And I was in a bit of a tricky situation. I didn't want to go back to my family because of my pride, you know, having gone from doing relatively well in the Navy through to being effectively homeless. So I decided that I would have to just live on the streets. And I used to walk around at night and sleep by day on the Central Line. And that's how I lived for a certain amount of time. And then eventually, I just got fed up with doing that because it was just exhausting. So I was finding anywhere that was quiet and completely out of sight, out of mind, where no one could see me. I wasn't a stereotypical homeless person in a doorway begging, because my pride would not allow me to do that. And I was down to my very, very last pound. And I thought to myself, okay, this has really got to count, this last pound. What am I going to do with it? And I was hungry at the time. And I thought to myself, I can either do something with it that would enable me to move forward, or I can feed myself. And I thought, I'm going to have to do something with it. So I went to a shop and I bought a toy mobile phones, because mobile phones were just being invented back then, for 67p. And because I had done a bit of door-to-door sales training after I left the Navy, I knew how to go door-to-door to sell things. And so I took that door-to-door, sold it for £3, and then went back to the shop and then bought 3 of them. First thing I did was buy some chips, because I was starving by then. Took them out and then obviously multiplied that again until I had £9 in my pocket. And I went back to the shop, bought loads more, and I just, over the course of what must be a good 6 weeks or so, just kept doing that over and over and over and over again. And after a while, I started taking out quite a lot of really good quality stuff. And I was making quite a lot of money. I mean, back then, I was making around about £900 a week, which in the 90s was quite a lot of money. But the key thing is that it enabled me to really work my way back into society again, and feel like a real human being with some value. And all through this time, I never lost sight of my goal in life, which was to be successful. So no matter how low I went, it was always there. That was always the driving force, because I wanted to be successful. And there was absolutely no way I'd let anything stand in my way. So fast forward to 1995, and I eventually ended up working as night manager in one of those backpackers hostels that I was staying in, and they gave me free rent in order to do the night shifts, which was great. But there was someone there that came from Torquay in Devon, and they managed, I don't know how they managed to do this, but they managed to convince me that they'd set up a job for me working in a hotel down in Torquay. And was I interested? Well, naturally I wanted to get out of London, because it was just manic, and I decided to say yes without doing any checks whatsoever. You know, looking back, it was an absolutely crazy thing to do. So I ended up in Torquay, and I ended up in this so-called hotel that they had set this job up, and there was no job for me. No one had heard of me. So I didn't have enough money to get back to London. I thought, okay, well, Torquay, here I stay. So I ended up being homeless again. And that was pretty rough in Torquay, because there's very little money there. You know, it's quite an exposed place, you know, to the elements and to society as a whole. It's quite an unforgiving place. You think London is bad, seaside towns, because of the deprivation levels, they can be even worse. But eventually, over the course of a couple of months or so, I managed to get into working for a hotel, and then I just gradually worked my way up from waiter to duty manager to hotel manager to restaurant manager, and then eventually I was landlord of a pub in Torquay, the Hole in the Wall. And I was at one point I believe anyway, I was told this, that I was the youngest landlord in the county, because there was only about 24 or so, something like that, 25 maybe. So everything was going quite well. But at that time, because Torquay is a party town, I ended up mixing business with the less with a more dubious side of life, you know, a drink, drugs, that sort of thing, and I was gradually spiraling down and down and down, much further. But the one thing that did happen there was that as I was the landlord of a pub, I was having to do the marketing for it to get people in, because it's quite a touristy area. And I latched onto marketing, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. You know, the fact that you can use words and visuals to entice people to walk in and spend money, I thought, was absolutely amazing. And at the very same time, it was the time where the internet was just sort of starting to be born. And because when I was a 14-year-old, still at home many years before this, I learned how to program on my trusty ZX Spectrum. And so really, I started combining the knowledge I had about computer programming, with marketing. And I thought, this is it. And I was building websites and tinkering away and experimenting. And I actually got quite good at it. And I got so good that I was hired by a top 10 law firm in the city to be their webmaster. And all of a sudden, I went from being a no one through to someone that was respected in the law firm for having expertise in the growing web. And I was their webmaster. And I was being paid quite a handsome amount for it as well. And it all really grew from there. Over the course of the next few years, I was helping several .com startups, and I was making a lot of people a lot of money by working for them. And I thought, if I can do this for other people, I can do this for me as well. So in 2004, I created my very first website. It's an events listings website called Brit Events. And it's still going now, and it was phenomenally successful. It was absolutely fantastic. It was making me a lot of money in the early stages. Now it's still there, and it doesn't earn very much money, but it was the catalyst that made me think, right, this is what I want to do. I want to build my own websites, not for anyone else, but my own websites. And over the course of the next few years, I started to build more and more websites until at the time when I was earning enough to go, right, okay, I could do this full time. I could turn this into a genuine business. So in 2010, I incorporated, and I paid back all the tax that I'd avoided over the last few years, which cost me a lot of money. And I did it all officially. And so ever since then, I've been building websites for my own company. So my company, Click2 Media, it's now got a portfolio of it's more than 30 different websites. Some are successful, some less successful, let's say. But it's got to the stage now where 1 in 6 of the UK population now use one of my websites every year. And it's kind of grown out of nothing apart from just having that last pound in my pocket where I decided to do something with it. And you have to excuse me, it's quite an emotional thing to have to think about. But it's not an emotional in a negative way. It's an emotional as in I cannot believe that I've made this happen just through sheer determination and motivation and persistence and deciding that I was not under any circumstances going to give up until I've reached where I wanted to be. And so today I've got a successful business. It hasn't made me a millionaire yet, but I'm quite comfortable. I've got a happy marriage, twin girls, 8-year-olds. I've learned to fly an aeroplane. I've got my own aeroplane now. One could say that the most important thing is that I've learned to be grateful of my journey and to be humble about where I came from, because I think it's important to always to look forward, but to always realise that you started with virtually next to nothing. So back in 2016, I decided that, and this was on the cusp really of my business really going very, very well, and I decided that I was now in a stage to give something back to society. And although I didn't really ask for any help from any homeless organisations when I was homeless, I've always had a bit of a passion for homeless causes, and to give something back in acknowledgement that there are so many other people out there that are going through the same things, that haven't actually got the willpower or the drive to make a success of their lives, because it's difficult and it's easy to give up when the chips are down. So I started a charity called kipbag.com, and we distribute these kit bags to homeless people. In each kit bag there is a sleeping bag, there's toiletries, there's warm clothing, there's everything that a rough sleeper could need to give them a little bit of warmth, a little bit of comfort, and a little bit of dignity. And we know that we can't eradicate homelessness through distributing the kit bags. That's not our mission at all, because it's such a huge thing. But what's important to us is that we just give someone. We could be saving lives, especially in the winter when it gets so bitterly cold. So that's really what we're trying to do with Kitbag. Now, with Kitbag, 100% of donations go into the charity. We're not one of those big charities that decide to cream off the profits, and take a share of it. Every single penny we raise goes into the kit bags, and if we have to go and distribute them, we pay for everything out of our own pockets. So there's no financial incentive whatsoever. The founders take absolutely nothing. So far we've since it started, we've distributed around about 1,000 kit bags to all areas around the UK. We're not quite there yet, because there are over 3,000 officially homeless people, rough sleepers, living on the streets, and there's many more that we don't know about that are hidden homeless.
Your life journey is amazing, and I think you've highlighted so many things there. I mean, not only the difference between being homeless in different areas of the UK and how the struggle can impact other people's lives. I mean, and also then you highlighting problems with alcohol and drugs. I mean, how did you overcome each obstacle? Because it sounds like there's so many challenges you faced.
It's just tackling them one by one, and never really losing, never losing sight of what you want out of life. Life is a funny thing, because I think when you get to my age, I'm only a year off 50. Oh my word! And you start to realise that you only get one shot at this, and it is so incredibly short. The decades just come and go like leaves in the wind, and you have to seize every single opportunity that you've got to make a difference, not just for your own journey, but for other people's journeys as well. Because we touch so many people's lives as we're going through, that it's not a case. I know a lot of people do try and force their way through life, knocking people over and treading on other people. But that's not what humans should be like. We should be all sort of gathering together and say, come on, we can do this. So going back to your original question, sheer persistence and never losing sight of what you want out of life.
And you've spoken about the life lessons as well, what you've learned throughout your entire life and experiences you've faced. What advice would you give to someone who's battling their own demons, but also for them to set themselves out in the world and start their own business and recognise their own skills and push forward?
I think, as I've said, never lose sight of where you want to be, because no matter what adversity comes your way, very rarely is there a challenge that can't be overcome in some way, shape or form. There's people out there that will offer you support. There are so many. With every obstacle comes a lesson. Now, a lot of people that come across obstacles tend to give up. Or just think, right, I can't do this. But really, if you think about it, if you think carefully about what it is that's in your way and where you want to be, there is more times than not a way of actually getting from A to B. And I think it's just persistence, because sometimes you can get knocked down so many times, time and time again. But it only takes that one time for one door to open, and before you know it, you're through it. But often it takes a lot of banging on a lot of doors to actually find the one that opens.
What a remarkable guy, right? It was a real pleasure speaking to Chris Haycock, Managing Director of Click2 Media. He's managed to overcome so many obstacles in his life and remain so positive. It really is wonderful. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a movie coming out about his life. And if there is, you heard it here first on Let's Go Kickass Today podcast. If you want to donate or help in any way you can to Kickbag, do make sure to check out their website. Well, that's it for my 10th episode of Let's Go Kickass Today. Thank you to my fabulous guests, Rozalla, Clementina Allende Iriarte and Chris Haycock, and for you for listening too. It's been an incredible year launching this podcast and hopefully inspiring and empowering people throughout the journey. I'll be back in 2020 with more kick-ass guests, because hey, that's what I do. Please do subscribe, comment, rate and share. I'm Vicky Carter. You keep kicking ass.